Okay, so the next is how to hide content visually. So there are different ways to do that. First is use the display property and the value is none, or we can use a visibility hidden. Then we can use a hidden attribute for the element. Then we can make a width 0 and height 0 pixel. This will also hide the element. Then we can use text indent, and in a minus we can push that element to the out of the screen. Then we can use opacity 0. Also we can use positioning. So we'll use the position absolute and the push that content to up the screen using the left property, and the value is minus 10,000. Okay, so the next is the z-index. The z-index property specifies the stack order of an element. An element with a greater stack order is always in front of element with a lower stack order. Z-index only works on positioned element. Next is a clear fix. Clear fix is a way for an element to automatically clear or fix its elements so that it does not need to add additional markup. What is mean by cascading? Cascading means selecting from several sources. The cascade is an algorithm or method to define the weight, that is importance of individual styling rules. It decides one of the style rule to apply out of 4 rules. So first is a web browser rule, second is external CSS rules using the link tag, then the third is styles inside CSS files, and then the fourth is inline attribute of the element style. So the CSS cascading means it decides the style rule to apply out of these 4. The next is difference between the nth child and nth of type selectors. The nth child pseudo class selector selects an child element based on a number. For example, nth child 4, as here the dot example and nth child 4, this will select the 4th child of the example container. Then the nth of type, it selects an child element based on number and the given type. For example, we have given here the p type. In second example we have given the div type. So p colon nth of type 2 means select the second p element, and in the next case div nth of type even means select all even divs in a container. Okay, so the next is difference between display block, display inline, and display inline block elements. The block elements and the display block always start a new line. For example, paragraph tag, h1 element, h1 div, and the header, these elements always starts on a new line. Then the inline elements and the inline elements and display inline don't start on a new line, they appear on the same line as the content and a tag. The a tag, span, and strong, these elements doesn't start on a new line, they just appear where they are. Then the display inline block, it's the same as inline but additionally allows to set width and height on the element, which is not possible in inline. The inline, for inline display inline, we cannot set width and height, it doesn't get applied to the element. But if we use the inline block they appear as inline, but we can assign width and height to the element. Okay, so the next is pseudo element. A CSS pseudo element is used to style specified part of an element. Pseudo elements magically inserts an element in our web page. And in pseudo classes, pseudo class is used to define a special state of an element. For example, we assign the CSS in a hover state, as well as for focused state using the colon hover and the colon focus. And in a pseudo element, we can apply CSS uh, using the double colon after double colon before. Okay, then the next is a clear property. It defines a floating elements allowed on left or right. So then there are four values can be applied to clear property. First is a none. This clear none allows floating elements on both side. Clear both will not allow floating elements on either side. And clear left or clear right. So uh, we can also CSS allows the floating elements to the right or left. Then the next is what is a clear fix. A clear fix is a way for an element to clear its child elements automatically without any additional markup. The clear fix property allows a container to wrap its floated children. For example, dot clear fix, and we'll use the overflow auto property. Suppose we have a, a right floated image in a container. In this case, container will always collapsed and image will see going beyond the container. So by assigning this clear fix class to a container, it will be wrapped around the image and image will be seen fully inside of the container. Okay, so the next is media queries. So the media queries are used to write device specific CSS. For example, as we see here, the media screen, the media only screen, and the max width 600 pixel. So this CSS rule will get applied to uh, width is 600 and less than 600. Which devices has this width? The this media directive will use the different values for different devices. So all will for the all devices, print will for printer devices, screen will for the display devices, and speech will use in speech devices. And the format will be this: media only screen and this resolution. Then the next is support. At the rate support, it is one of the future queries. The at the rate support CSS at rule. This is the at rule. Let us use specify declaration that depend on browser support for one or more specific CSS features. For example, we are checking here the display flex is supported in browser or not. For that we have written this CSS at rule supports at the rate supports, and we are checking here the browser is supporting for display flex property or not. And inside this, if we have written some CSS rule, it will get apply if the display flex property is supported in browser. Okay, so the next is difference between EM and the REM units. The EM units inherit their value from the font size of a parent element, and the REM units inherit their value from the font size of a root element, that is HTML. Then the exclamatory and important. If we assign this to any property value, it means it will take a highest priority, and it will override other values for that element. CSS vendors prefixes. So um, there are some browser specific prefixes. Dash WebKit dash we use for Android browser, Chrome browser, iOS browser, and Safaris. Or dash emoji dash will use for Mozilla Firefox. Dash ms dash will use for Internet Explorer, and dash o dash for Opera browser. These are vendor prefixes and used to write some browser specific properties. In background attachment scroll, it will scroll the background image of a div with its content. Suppose we have one div and it has a long content, char scrolling, and if we have attached if you use this background attachment as a scroll, so that background image will scroll with the uh, content of the divs. Then the word break property, it has two values, normal and the break word. Break word will break the word of viewport with ends in between a word. Means it means it will break word will break the word if viewport width ends in between a word. So it will wrap the word on next line. Okay, so the file splitting for larger projects, we can create different files for typography, colors, layouts. The next is the attribute selectors. Uh, as we see here, uh, we have used three examples for attribute selector here. We are using the href attribute and the value is https, and we are using this power to sign, then dollar sign and the star sign. So we will see what is the meaning of each. So this okay, maths power sign. So the attribute value begins with the http. This will match the all the links which has a attribute value starting with https. Then the second is the it will match the all a elements which values ends with .pdf. We use the dollar sign for it, and the star sign means it will match the all a element which has a href attribute and its value is containing the css as a substring. The next is initial and the initial value of property, meaning the default value of property, and the inherit value of property from its parents. Okay, so if we don't suppose we have the position property, and if we assign it the value as a initial, it will take a static value because the position's default value is a static. Okay, then the next is media queries and responsive web design. It uses the at rule media rule to include a block of css properties only if a certain condition is true. For example, we written here the at rule @ media only screen and The max width is 600 pixel. Then we will assign the background color light blue to a body tag. This means if the browser window is 600 pixel or smaller, then this bunch of CSS will apply. Okay, then we have positions. Positions are used to define a layouts. It has a 1 2 3 4 5 different values. We can assign to position property. We'll see the first is static, then the second is relative, third is absolute, then the fixed and the sticky. So the static is a default value of position property, and it doesn't affect by uh, TRBL, that is top, right, bottom and left. It renders as it written in a markup. And the relative is its normal position, but it affects by top, right, left, bottom. Then the absolute value is relative to the nearest ancestor who is having relative position. If there is no element with relative position in ancestors available, uh, it takes the browser window as a ancestor. Then fixed, it is relative to browser and affects by this TRBL. Then the sticky, this position is based on user scroll. Once the scrolling is reached to given offset, the element got stick there.